Well, hello. Thanks for joining us today for today's Lunch and Learn series. My name is Ed Mills. I'm with the Colorado Broadband Office in the Office of Information Technology with the state of Colorado. Lunch and Learn series is something that occurs at least every month. We have different things that are all broadband related. We do have some special Lunch and Learns from time to time. And we are really excited today to feature the Fiber Broadband Association. Before we get started with that, though, we want to remind you that we have our website at broadband.co.gov. And this is where you can find out what is going on in the state of Colorado and everything that is related to broadband. And without further ado, I want to go ahead and introduce our subject. I'm going to go ahead and stop share, and Lisa, if you want to go ahead and get your screen ready. Today's Lunch and Learn series, as we said, is featuring the Fiber Broadband Association, and we are actually very pleased that we can have this webinar in July. We've wanted for some time to do this, but with COVID-19, we weren't able to make it happen until today. Lisa Youngers is the president and CEO of the Fiber Broadband Association. And we know that fiber is already the critical input to the 21st century communications, as we learned in COVID-19 and as those lessons are coming true every day, whether connectivity in the home, school, work, or in our anchor institutions. It's the basis of 5G wireless, low orbit satellites, IoT, smart city applications. And while the Fiber Broadband Association annual deployment data continues to show an upward trend in fiber deployments as the new realities of COVID-19 take hold, we know that fiber will be in even greater demand as time progresses. As social interactions work, school shift to remote home situations, demands of the network have highlighted that fiber-based networks and are the needed technical solution, something that we have a great history in. We understand the capabilities of it. And so the presentation today is going to highlight brand new broadband usage numbers from the FBA and why fiber is the best solution to meet increased demands on the network and the constant need for reliable, high-performing networks. We have to say with each of our Lunch and Learns, we've got to give you a disclaimer that the Governor's Office of Information Technology does not endorse any solutions that we have here. We have to keep an agnostic approach, but we do believe broadband is very important. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Lisa so that she can lead us in this important subject today. Lisa?
Great. Well, thank you, Ed, and good afternoon, everyone. And thank you so much for allowing me to present today and for joining us. And I'm looking forward to this opportunity. I have a few prepared remarks, but I welcome your questions. I think we'll take those at the end. And so I've prepared these slides here, and I'm going to walk through this now. So thank you, everybody, for joining. Fiber deployment and responding to a pandemic reality. And of course, Ed set us up here really well. We have, at the Fiber Broadband Association, a lot of statistics, a lot of annual numbers, and then, of course, we have some pandemic numbers as well, so a lot of data to support what we're talking about. So first, I'm going to start off a little bit about me. Who are you? Who is this person talking to us today? So originally from the Midwest, I went to the University of Wisconsin undergrad, and I have a law degree from now Mitchell Hamlin School of Law, formerly William Mitchell School of Law in St. Paul, Minnesota. I started my working career in satellite. I worked for CONUS Communications. It was the original satellite news gathering organization, even before the networks and CNN had a satellite to do satellite news gathering. And this was independently owned by Hubbard Broadcasting out of Minneapolis. And I was a satellite news coordinator and a satellite capacity and space booker, commercial bookings on 4 satellite transponders that we had a large term lease on. Great experience and taught me sort of the disruption of what we were all used to. It certainly made possible live news across the country. So started my career in satellite. After law school, went on to be a Minnesota Assistant Attorney General, advising the PUC. I like to point that out when I'm speaking with state folks, so they know my roots are the states also. When I was at the PUC in Minnesota, the Telecom Act had just passed. So we had the pleasure of creating local competition rules, creating processes, and then holding the first sets of arbitrations so that CLECs could become local providers in the state and also interconnect with the incumbents, and also get the CLEC authority and the CLEC certificates, and then actually coordinating with the FCC on long distance entry of what was then US West, then Quest, and CenturyLink, of course, allowing them entry into the long distance market. So I started my legal career with the PUC and doing local telecom issues and rules and advising the PUC. I went on to work for MCI and their federal regulatory group as a lawyer and lobbyist for them, actually in DC. That's when I moved to Washington. Used my local experience to help on local competition rules with MCI, and then representing MCI at the FCC and on the Hill, and the same with my job at GCI, a local CLEC and cable provider actually out of Alaska, but I was in the DC office working still on local competition, and then of course universal service, telehealth, E-rate, other USF programs, very important to a company like that. And then I went on to XO Communications, where I was for about 14 years. I ran their federal regulatory shop, still here in DC, doing lawyer stuff and lobbying before the FCC and the Hill. And with XO, I also had strategy and external communications and internal communications, and a fuller set of responsibilities, including M&A work, because XO sold itself to Verizon, which I was heavily involved in. And then XO, we spun off our upper millimeter wave band wireless spectrum, which became the home of 5G. And I ran that company as its CEO, Nextlink Wireless, for about 2 years until Verizon bought that as well. So a long line of wired and wireless communications in my background. And after Verizon bought Nextlink Wireless and acquired the spectrum that would become the home of their 5G work, I took the role running the Fiber Broadband Association, where I've been for 2 years as its president and CEO. So that's a little bit about me. A lot of different communications roles and a lot of different in parts of the industry sector. The Fiber Broadband Association, so who is that? So we are the only association across the Americas dedicated to the rollout of fiber networks. And we advocate for that, and we advocate for accelerating deployment of all fiber networks. And also we are the voice for ultra high speed wireline broadband deployment. A little bit more about the Fiber Broadband Association. We have 250 members. Our members represent everybody in the fiber space. We have large and small network providers, construction members who are building networks, vendors who help to support building networks. Ditch Witch, for example, is a member. On the service provider side, Google Fiber, Verizon, smaller carriers as well, Lumos Networks, Chantel. And then we have equipment providers and aggregators, Graybar, AdTran, Clearfield are all members. And also we have the manufacturers, those that make the fiber optics, like Corning, AFL, and OFS. We also represent electric co-ops, who, as you all know, are getting into the business of building fiber networks and running fiber networks, and municipal networks. Some cities and a lot of folks in Colorado are members of the Fiber Broadband Association. Fort Collins. We've also worked with some of your other cities there that are building their own networks. Loveland. We had a conference in Fort Collins last year. We also did some things with Breckenridge. We featured their story in one of our newsletters. So I know there's a lot going on in Colorado in the municipal and co-op space, and we happily work with all of them. The Fiber Broadband Association, we lobby, we educate, and we allow for networking. And we also do a lot of research. Our hallmark of our association is our Fiber Broadband Starter Kit. We teach entities how to build a fiber network, and we have education around that as well. So, and the great thing about the Fiber Broadband Association, we are across the Americas, Colorado, of course Colorado, Canada, and we also have a Latin America chapter, but we also have a fiber optic sensing association affiliate, which I will talk about when we talk about smart cities. And we also are a part of a global alliance of fiber associations, and we meet globally at least once a year, not this year, but normally. And I like to say we're part of a global network, but we work very much on driving fiber closer to the consumer, into rural parts of the country, into communities of all sizes. And so we're global, but we drive all the way to the consumer and the anchor institutions and the cities and communities that support them. So a big breadth of how we impact the industry. So we do annual statistics, which Ed referenced, and I know I just referenced that we do a lot of research at the association, which I think really lends credibility. I think we kind of lead the pack on the associations and providing a lot of research, and I'm actually going to walk through some of that here. The takeaway here is we do an annual report every December, so there will be new numbers this December 2020. These are from 2019. At the end of 2019, and here was the conclusion. We definitely continued to see fiber growth last year, United States and across North America, a 17% growth in 2019 of fiber deployments. That's kind of that middle number there. And to break that down a little bit, you can see along the left-hand side, 450,000 route miles of fiber deployed last year. And then this chart is interesting because it shows you the different iterations of fiber that we measure, whether it's fiber to the home, fiber to the outdoor small cell, fiber as backbone to HFC, so cable, fiber to the tower, fiber to the business, anyway, and fiber long haul is on the bottom there. So we measure all the different ways and all the different iterations of how fiber is deployed. Interestingly, the reason we circled the greenish color there is that's fiber to the outdoor small cell, and you really need fiber to support 5G deployment. And so we saw a quick uptake in fiber supporting outdoor small cell, and that's because of 5G, and we expect that number to keep growing. So we thought that was significant. So let's keep going there. Why fiber? We talk about, when I go out and speak about, fiber is still increasing in its deployment, and why is that? I mean, the first, most obvious reason is 5G. We absolutely need fiber for 5G. When we talk to our construction members who build wired and wireless networks, and they have a lot of 5G network builds on their schedule right now, of course, they said a 5G build is really just a fiber build with an antenna at the end. I mean, you absolutely just need tons and tons of fiber for 5G. So 5G is one of the things that's driving the ongoing deployment of fiber. And I put the spectrum wave here because, as you all know, there's three sort of flavors of how 5G is being deployed, whether it's upper millimeter wave band, and that's kind of Verizon's focus, and that's the spectrum they bought from me a few years ago, or mid-band, which is CBRS, where you see a lot of activity, or even low band, which is more a T-Mobile play. All of those iterations, no matter which part of the spectrum you're in, all require fiber. So why fiber? 5G deployment. So, and 5G, of course, the use cases itself, that's driving the demand for fiber to, fiber supports the enhanced mobile broadband capacity and speed. Fiber's characteristic is low latency, and it's better for gaming and not only autonomous vehicle, but also remote surgery and other things that require and depend on low latency. That's a fiber play. Massive machine-to-machine communication and many IoT devices. All of those things which we're seeing and evolving in a 5G world all demand the characteristics of fiber. Also, the architecture of fiber, whether it's front haul, back haul, or mid haul, all need 5G. Front haul being the computing and processing, a centralized place, and backhaul, of course, transmitting information to the final destination, and mid-haul in between, all require lots of fiber and its characteristics. We did a study called, sorry, I'm trying to move this here. Oh, what did I do? Oh, sorry, hang on, guys. There we go. We did a study, FBA produced a paper in the last couple of years. It was called The Road to 5G is Paved with Fiber. And in that paper and in that research, we determined that to meet 5G and the wireless demands, we estimated we would need 1.4 million miles of fiber in just the top 25 US metros. And that doesn't even include sort of thinking through the numbers for the rest of the communities. So just in those top 25 metros, we thought we would need 1.4 million miles more of fiber to support 5G and wireless. And Deloitte did a study in the last year and a half, and they found that the US would need a $130 to $150 billion in investment in the US in new fiber over the next 5 to 7 years, so we're in that window right now, to support 5G and wireless. So sort of all the estimates are we need lots and lots of fiber. And why is that for 5G? And it's the densification. So as you know, in the upper millimeter wave band scenario we talked about to support 5G, we need lots of small cells, and they're going to be closer and closer together, and those all need to be linked by fiber. And so we show the densification changes from 3G to 4G to 5G, and the number of cells needed and how close they are, so cell density. And our summary was to get to 4G, we required 25 times more fiber, and to go to 5G, we required at least 16 times more fiber on top of that, and it's because of this densification. Why else fiber? Why else are we seeing this drive in fiber? And we really say smart cities and smart communities are really driving the need for fiber. These are just some applications examples, and I know you all know tons of them. Colorado has a big smart city presence. I know there's a big smart city conference annually in Colorado, and of course, your cities are out at the forefront of this. These are just some examples from some of our members of how we're seeing smart cities and smart communities use fiber, whether it's for smart grid reasons. We just did a presentation on this in our Fiber for Breakfast series on a company that deployed a fiber network, electric co-op deployed a fiber network to be more energy efficient, to save money, to enhance their smart grid and energy conservation and monitoring capabilities. They had to implement a fiber network to do that. We've seen companies use their fiber networks to monitor health patients at home, certainly censoring networks. And actually, let me pause there for a second. We do, as I mentioned, we have the Fiber Optic Sensing Association as our affiliate. Fiber optic sensing is another application once you have fiber optics in the ground. And fiber optic sensing is being used for things such as monitoring building integrity, bridge integrity, pipeline, oil and gas pipeline, there we go, safety and monitoring along the pipeline. Seismic activity can be measured by fiber optic sensing. Borders can be patrolled by fiber optic sensing. And there's a lot of security and monitoring capabilities because of fiber optic sensing and the capability there. Smart mobility, I know you're all aware of smart pedestrian, smart traffic signals. A lot of that needs fiber as its backbone, and then of course citywide Wi-Fi. As you probably all remember, story about 2008, Philadelphia put together and was sort of leading the way because no one had done this, a citywide Wi-Fi plan. It received a lot of press, a lot of attention. Policymakers in Washington were excited. This is great, a city launching citywide free Wi-Fi, 2008, remember it was new. It had a lot of attention and ultimately it failed. And if you read about it now historically, the evaluations everybody has sort of the next day, the day after, the conclusion was they didn't have enough of a fiber network to support a citywide Wi-Fi. And really in all of these cases, I'm fortunate to go speak at a lot of smart city events, which is great. And any smart city planner will tell you these applications are fantastic and they're excited about it. But part of their planning also has to be, where is my fiber? How much fiber do I have? Do I need more? The smart city planners all say, if you don't have the right underlying fiber network, you can't do all of these great things. So we do know that fiber is so important to smart cities and smart communities. And staying with that for a minute, we did some research at the association. We found that cities with fiber have on average 37% more deployed small cells and just over 35% more smart city applications. So definitely we show the correlation there. We also found 33% of cities without fiber report small cell activity versus 60% of cities with fiber to the residence report that small cell activity. We also did a GDP study in 2019. It was to confirm research we had done 5 years earlier. And indeed, we found in that study last year a positive correlation between the availability of fiber networks and GDP in a particular city. So we know having fiber in the city does positively correlate to GDP. And, you know, several reasons for that, whether it's being able to work entrepreneurially from home, remote work, supporting businesses, and et cetera. We also found, I'm going to go through a few more research items here. We also found that fiber adds value to the home, whether it's rent or a home that's owned, or whether it's condo or a home, an actual standalone home. Our Render and Associates, RVA, reference there, did a study for us in 2018. We do this every couple years. We found where there's fiber available to the home or the condo. In a condo that is owned, we found a 3.4% increase in value. In an MDU rent situation, we found a 9% increase in value. And in homes, we found a 4% increase in value where they have fiber available to their home. We also found anecdotally when asked, since we do a lot of research, that renters will, it's the number one question they ask, what is the availability of high-speed broadband here? It is their number one consideration. We've also seen that in renters looking for vacation rentals. We see that there as well. That's one of their number one questions. Do I have high-speed broadband available to me here? So we do know it's correlated to what people value in ownership, rental, and in vacation. We also did a study in the last couple of years with a University of Tennessee professor and researcher, Bento Lobo, Professor Lobo. And our study in Tennessee found that access to high-speed broadband significantly reduces unemployment rates, especially in rural communities. We found counties with access to high-speed broadband had a 0.26% lower unemployment rate compared to low-speed counties. I think that is fairly intuitive. I don't think that probably surprises anyone, but we did do the research working with the university and found those numbers bared out. A big study we did last year, while we're staying with our research here, and the importance of fiber. We know fiber is important and we're going to talk about the pandemic actually in a minute, telework, doing school at home, our social interactions at home. We know fiber is correlated to increased home value, lower unemployment, higher GDP, and the development of smart cities. So how do we get fiber everywhere? Obviously, that's our concern. We grew a little tired of hearing people say off the cuff, well, fiber everywhere, that'll cost trillions of dollars and, you know, take years. And we found no, that's not true. We commissioned Cartesian, who did a cost study for us in the last couple of years, and they concluded that we could reach 90% of US homes with fiber broadband networks in the next 10 years, well, by 2029 now, for a price tag of $70 billion. So we like to say, no, it's not trillions. It's actually $70 billion. We know what the number is. And we have a study, we filed it, this particular study is public, we filed it with the RDOF at the FCC last year when the FCC had that docket open, and we reference it a lot. The details in the study include why have the costs come down. It's improved targeted government support, I would say it's federal and state, of course, more municipal builds, private sector innovation, public-private partnerships, and innovative deployment models. We have a lot of members who are at the front end of manufacturing fiber optics or deploying fiber optics, and they do report that deployments have come down, they are more efficient, more can be done in the factory before it's rolled out to the field. There's greater planning tools, better software that allows for planning, and then even the construction members report lower costs and more efficiency in how they are building those networks. So we see a few things that have helped to bring the cost down, but the punchline here is it's not trillions. No, it won't take forever. We could reach 90% of US homes this decade for 70 billion. And you hear lawmakers talking about numbers, and so this number isn't so crazy. So then the pandemic hit. So what does that tell us about broadband and fiber specifically? We were extremely fortunate that I mentioned RVA earlier, Mike Render and Associates, who does research for the Fiber Broadband Association. He had just released his annual consumer study. So we were one of the only entities, and we've been asked about it a lot, that had a study that talked about broadband usage by consumers during the pandemic. So what did he find? This was a study across, just conducted this spring, random study. And first he asked about what is the internet, or what have you needed the internet for and relied on it for during the pandemic? And these were the responses. And I don't think any of this is surprising. Certainly communicating with family and friends, getting information, always entertainment, that was probably true before, but work, educating the kids, telemedicine, etc. So these were the numbers we saw. Definitely some of the ways that people said the internet has been critical for them during the pandemic. He also found that, and this won't surprise anyone either, the use of advanced two-directional apps has exploded, in other words, video conferencing. Suddenly, something we maybe didn't do so much from home, it's become something we've relied on. Look at me here, being the example right this second. And that has absolutely exploded from prior years. Not really surprisingly. I mean, definitely the yellow line is family, blue line is business. You know, lots of family Zoom calls, work video calls, and I don't think this is surprising, but the increase, it's a pretty sharp increase, and we've put some numbers around that. These numbers show the rise in, and the percentages are high, and we just circled a few as an example of the numbers of people online during the day, and that also exploded during the pandemic. We have a few city examples here. Denver is not circled, I'm sorry, this is from another presentation, but Denver here up 0.104%, Jacksonville up 0.73%, San Francisco Bay Area up 133%, precisely for the reasons we just talked about during the pandemic, but the numbers are really significant and really help to sort of illustrate how much everyone was relying on the internet during the pandemic. So what Render and Associates did with the material they got, which I'll walk through in just a couple charts, the internet has held up really well during the pandemic, and of course there are some stresses on it. So Mike took the speeds reported by our respondents and he divided them up into tiers, tier 1 through 5. And shows the average download speed, upload speed, and latency. And these tiers are divided by 5 across the different speeds of broadband that people were experiencing. And you can see the difference in download and upload speeds, and really a significant difference in latency. All the way here at tier 5, which would be your slowest broadband speeds, 783 milliseconds of latency. That would really impact you. I mean, certainly, if you're gaming or doing, you know, autonomous vehicle or virtual reality or, God forbid, remote surgery, obviously you can't rely on this kind of latency. And so really these differences in tiers of available speed shows really is illustrated significantly by the difference in latency. But he also looked at, across these same tiers, how much in-home rationing and online time waiting did you experience with the different speeds, different tiers of speeds. And this is also very telling. In-home rationing, so you have to ask your kids to get off whatever they're doing because you have a video call. Percentage of time you've had to do in-home rationing, or maybe you have more than one person working at home or someone doing online school. I mean, those really grow significantly across the tiers of speeds of broadband. And the same with online time waiting. How long are you waiting for something to load? And they estimate the hours lost per week where they have some online time waiting. And this can be really significant and really impact someone's ability to do their job or be productive, either at work or even school. And so you can really see there's a difference across the tiers. When he looked at those tiers, he asked what type of broadband is in each tier reported, and then the types of subscribers found in each tier. And you can see fiber, cable, DSL, other, wireless, satellite, dial-up. You can see sort of where the percentages fall. Obviously, tier 1 is more fiber and cable, a lot of cable still. And then down on the slower speeds, you see heavily on DSL and wireless or satellite. Oops, sorry about that. And then on the bottom graph, what types of subscribers also are in each of those tiers. So what we concluded, what our folks concluded, is what really has mattered during the pandemic is upstream. And you've probably heard this. And pre-pandemic, of course, we might have been all at home, not as much on video conferences, but streaming Netflix, maybe downloading a file. And in those scenarios, download or the downstream was always more important and more what we relied on. But what the pandemic has shown and really shined a big bright light on is it's the upstream that matters. So if someone's breaking up on a call, or if there's some sort of breakage in internet, it's usually at the edge, closer to the people's houses, and it's the upstream. And then the question is, what is their last mile technology? So we really found that upstream matters. It's never mattered more than during the pandemic, or shined a big bright light on it. And if this is our new normal, where we're working, going to school from home, it will continue to matter. So from ours, not surprisingly, from our association's perspective, of course, fiber is the more significant technology to deliver that. And that's because it brings the best sort of in terms of upstream. We really think, I guess I'll get to it here. I have a legislative slide real quick, but we definitely think that networks should be symmetrical for this reason. It supports more of what we're doing and what the demands are on our networks and what we're all trying to get done. Quickly then, and then I'll just conclude. We do follow, we're here in DC, we're active at the FCC and on the Hill. We're also active in the states where we need to be. I don't have somebody in every state, so we do what we can. Like you, we're following COVID-19 related legislation, the CARES Act. Here's some of the things it provided for and passed. The HEROES Act passed the House, but otherwise in negotiations. Here's some of the money it provides for. We support the Klobuchar-Welch bill, which would reimburse providers who have been waiving fees and helping where they can, where someone can't afford internet. And then, of course, Healthcare Broadband Expansion Acts, both SHATS and SU have bills. They're actually companion bills, and we've supported both of those as well. We're watching all of this. We watch all of the infrastructure bills as well. And not surprisingly, for the Fiber Broadband Association, our main point, which is actually in the HEROES Act, is we support gigabit symmetrical networks. It's what I was talking about. Fiber is really the better future-proof option. It provides the upstream that folks really need. We are concerned where speeds aren't enough, broadband isn't good enough, and we think prioritizing gigabit or symmetrical networks is really the answer. And where we advocate for infrastructure bills, this is something we really focus on. So happy to take your questions. I think in summary, we of course would like to see fiber networks deployed everywhere, fiber to the home, of course, but also fiber to anchor institutions. Fiber to support has to be there for 5G, towers, wireless networks, always been the case, smart city applications, and then all the new IoT applications that were kind of sprinkled throughout the presentation. Fiber is just the better answer, and we often find where broadband speeds aren't enough, those same communities end up coming back and either having to rebuild or try to get new funding to upgrade or make those networks even more future-proof and be at the speeds people really need. So we support, let's just do it right. Let's just do it once, do it right, out of the gate, from the get-go. And those really planning for smart cities or their 5G networks, those really doing the planning and doing the deployment, they all know and understand we really need fiber networks and we really need symmetrical networks, and that's really fiber. So, and we're happy to support. We support states and cities and communities and co-ops and municipal networks that want to build fiber networks. We have a lot of education and resources there. Love to keep talking to folks and supporting them. People do reach out to us for that, and we love to support them back. So that's where our work is. That's our advocacy. And Ed, I will turn that back over to you.
Great information. In fact, I think a lot of these, as you said, some of these assumptions we've made, but you really put the raw numbers to it. And I'm sure that our participants have questions. So let's open it up for questions. And we'll monitor the chat room, and we'll bring those up. You just concentrate on any verbal questions might come through. We'll start us off.
Well, of course I will, Ed. This is Teresa Ferguson. Can you hear me? I can't
Teresa.
tell. My internet connection's not working so great today. So, Lisa, thank you for joining us. I can't tell you how much I appreciate having you join us for this thorough overview of what your association is doing. You know, just some big picture questions here. You know, everybody's pushing 5G, 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 and you covered it great. You know, the road to 5G is paved with fiber. Is 5G, I think there's a lot of misconceptions about 5G. Is 5G synchronous? And, you know, is there, you know, the criticality that you identified that we found in the pandemic is that it's that upstream. We gotta have the upstream to be able to function. Is 5G synchronous? I've heard yes and no. So do you have some insights for us on that?
Yeah, so I do think different companies tell you yes or no. I think that's fair. I think I would like to go dig into that a little further. I do think, in fairness, well, and first of all, like, thank you for opening this piece up. And Teresa's a friend, so I'm so happy that, you know, we're together. This is great. So I always say, you know, and I'm sure you've heard this forever, right? When 5G was such a buzz, and I think this state audience is a great one to tee this up with. 5G was such a buzz, and everywhere I went at meetings and conferences, people would say, well, when is rural America getting 5G, right? That was sort of a natural question. It suddenly dawned on me, because you need fiber. I said, I think we should be asking, when is that rural community getting fiber? Then they might stand a shot at getting 5G. So I always try to put that in the right order, that you need the one to get the other. But you're asking about sort of its capabilities, and I'll just share a couple thoughts. So as you know, the 3GPP working group, they've been working on the 5G standards for a long time, and I don't think they're done. Now, there was a release recently, so they must be awfully close. But I use that as an example to say, I think 5G itself will evolve. And so while some may claim it's synchronous and some may claim it's not, I think in any event, it has different iterations and different evolutions. And I do think that's probably what they're working towards. I can't speak to the current status. I did just hear Verizon's doing 5G home, and I think that is their goal, but I don't know their technical, current technical results. And so I don't know if they're there right now. So I would have to dig into that further. But, you know, to your point, now 5G does share a lot of the characteristics, you know, I highlighted about fiber. That's why 5G and fiber are so compatible. And so I think they're hoping, I think that's what they're hoping they apply to, you know, that's what they're hoping they can supply ultimately. But, you know, great question. Teresa, I'm not sure. I would have to dig in further. And it sounds like you've heard both as well, right? So I don't know.
Well, I've heard it follows the paradigm of wireless, and that wireless, as you know, even our large broadband providers in the country have really focused on a download paradigm, so a consumption paradigm versus a creation. And so, you know, just curious. I know the IEEE hasn't finished all those, so I did. It wasn't exactly a softball question, so
no, it's. I mean, I think it's.
Thanks for talking around it for us.
But I think it's a good point, and I think, you know, you all know this as well as I do. That's the problem with rolling out any new technology, right? It's, you know, it's supposed to do X, Y, and Z. Does it get there all at once? What's the evolution? What's the iteration? So, or what are the various iterations? And so, I mean, obviously, I think they're hoping for, so.
Excellent. Anyone have a question they'd like to ask Lisa?
This is Megan, also with the Colorado Broadband Office. I had a follow-up on a comment you just made, Lisa, saying that 5G, like, when is it going to get to the rural areas, when fiber gets to the rural areas? I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more about the study on the cost of getting fiber to every home, and
Mm-hmm.
if you have any insights on um, the cost of getting fiber into the very rural areas.
Right. So in the Cartesian cost study itself, I mean, they did find, you know, their conclusion was that we could reach 90% of the US by 2029. They did find that last 10% was, you know, that was where the cost was so much more. So I'm sure you can all imagine, and it is in the study, I just don't have it in front of me. What are those last 10%? What are, and they did use census and FCC data to come to those conclusions. So in the cost itself, as I mentioned, they did find a lot of deployment had come down, and you know, when we talk to our member companies, they're excited about some of the practices. You know, they have more going on in the fact that they roll more out into the field that's ready to go. There's less that has to happen while standing there. There's better planning tools, more efficient software that they implement. But I also think it, and of course, the public partnerships are really key, and then there's funding, right? And you all, of course, know state funding, federal funding, and then private investment as well. So there's a lot of important public-private partnership models, and I'm sure you all can imagine of some. I'm aware of one big project in the middle of the country where the public-private partnership designed not well, and the government entity assumed all of the risk, while the private entity they were partnering with was able to enjoy a guaranteed revenue when there wasn't revenue. So that was a poorly constructed public-private partnership, for example. So that's really important also in the model of getting fiber to rural areas. But then I really wanted to underscore, we see a lot of the electric co-ops wanting to get into their own fiber networks. And of course, there's municipal power fiber networks as well. So even when, and I've seen the benefits of the EPB out of Chattanooga in particular, walked us through all the benefits once they had their fiber network in place. They could do truck rolls for everything. They could do software upgrades at all their different terminals that they would have never been able to do or push out. And then even in disasters and restoration, just the, you know, they could hold off a problem somewhere else because they knew they had a problem elsewhere in the network, and they knew this because of their fiber network and monitoring and being able to send messages out. So a lot of benefits, it seems, on the energy side. And so when I know folks are like, well, who in the world would build a fiber network in all of these places? I mean, the answer should be the power utility. I think they're a big possible target of building those networks. And then, of course, private as well. So I just think there's a lot of models that can be explored. I do think there's definitely entities that can be sort of the anchor for that. And then speaking of the word anchor, of course, once that fiber is out into a community, even rural, the number of benefits and applications are sort of endless. Obviously, there's fiber to the home and fiber to your anchor institutions as the benefits, but there's power utility and all of the benefits that brings. But also, I mentioned the fiber optic sensing abilities, so you could have greater monitoring of things that are out in the community, smart agriculture, precision and smart agriculture. Those are supported by fiber networks. So there's really just sort of endless benefits once that fiber is into the community. And I think sort of a policy and a economics point, I think once communities understand that and really embrace that, I think there's so many beneficial reasons to support getting fiber into all of these communities. And then, of course, supporting towers, networks that we all rely on anyway, and then 5G if you're going to have it. So I just think there's sort of endless benefits there. And that's the reason to drive the fiber, I think, closer to those communities. In terms of the dollars, those were some of the lowering of deployment costs that we saw, but I can also make sure that you can see the public study. Megan.
Great, thank you. I think there's a few questions that came in on the chat. One is, what can consumers do to get involved and raise awareness for poor rural internet? For example, our Colorado broadband map shows we have high speeds, yet we do not. So that might be a question that Lisa can chime in on, but the
But
broadband
Teresa
office
has an
might want
opinion.
to talk about.
Well, I'll just say a real quick thing, and then I think Teresa can jump in. So, community members make a difference, definitely. So we've had communities come to us, they've gotten together as a group, said, we want a broadband network. So communities do it, or communities and citizens can bring it, if they have an electric board, they can bring it to their electric co-op board and say, this is what we need. But they can also bring it to the attention of their city and support them. And I think when some of our members who help cities plan build for broadband networks, it's a major component in the planning. What is your community support? What is your anchor institution support? So it's actually a really important component in building a broadband fiber network. And so I think the citizens' voice and community know whatever form it is in, I actually think is really critical. And I think people do hear them. And so there's that. And then on, I know Teresa will talk about, the FCC is supposed to fix that, and there's supposed to be some money for them to do. But I think everybody recognizes where maps aren't accurate, or they don't actually capture what's really going on there. And that doesn't help. I've said enough. Let me let Teresa talk.
Well, to directly answer that question on the topic of what a citizen specifically can do, please go to the Colorado Broadband Office's website and do a speed test from your location. Put your address in and fill out the information as to what your download speed is and your upload speed. Because Megan Gernert of the CBO and our OIT GIS team use that information to inform the accuracy of the mapping information that we gather from the industry on a voluntary basis. The state broadband offices and the FCC can only collect the data that the providers share. Specifically, the broadband offices, we basically have to beg for broadband data mapping information from the providers. They are not required to provide that to us. So when they do provide that information, what we can use to check their reported, self-reported data, we can use that speed test data that we get from consumers directly. So my plea would be, please go to the CBO website and participate in the speed test and provide your location and the data rate download and upload speeds that you are experiencing. That will inform state policy in where to direct funding.
And Megan, can you please throw that up and share that so that our listeners and viewers can see where that's at?
Yeah, I'll pull it up in a sec.
Lisa, while Megan's doing that, I wanted to address something too, more directly, more head on. You know, we're seeing municipalities, we're seeing rural electric co-ops, we're seeing new entrants come to greenfield builds or backfills, right, of communities. And they're bringing fiber to the prem. They're not going back and looking at copper technology. They're not looking many times at fixed wireless. They're bringing fiber.
Yeah.
So what is the return on investment that, what's the lens that they're looking at that the rest of the industry, the incumbents, are not looking at to say, hey, this ROI makes sense to me? So I know you've done all this research and the numbers and the data and what have you. Have you, have you sort of figured out where that view of the return on investment is different between those two groups? Because it's two groups. It's either they see it as good or not.
Well, I think because they're able, they're doing a fresh new build and they're investment for it right off the bat. I think they, and the do it right, do it once, attitude, make it fiber from the get-go. I don't know, and I should say in the Cartesian, something you said reminded me of this point. In the Cartesian cost study, they did find that once deployed, this might surprise folks, once deployed in a rural area, the fiber uptake in a rural area is sometimes faster by percentage than in other areas because they've been starving for decent broadband for so long. So the take rate is actually a little surprising sometimes in new rural areas where there's suddenly a new fiber network. People are excited and they're like, oh great, I'm gonna jump on this right away. So I'm not sure why the incumbents don't always build in those areas. I would think the ROI is all the great things fiber can do. I'm sure institutions are bought into it, maybe a hospital or hospital campus, other higher ed institutions. So I don't know if the incumbents don't go there, don't build there. I don't know that I understand it. I do know that sometimes the incumbents like to claim, or they don't always love to see new entrants. We are agnostic about who builds, and some incumbents, not all of them, but some have an opinion. But I do know, I've said to them, and I know rural communities have said to them when they've complained maybe about a broadband program, money, the answer is, well, you're not there. So there does seem to be a disconnect. Not only do they not see the ROI, but I don't think they understand you're really not there. And I don't know why. I don't know why that is. I mean, I think that's a question. I don't know what that is as a company strategy. I don't know why they don't want to be, everywhere. Maybe because they have costs elsewhere and they can't make the case. Maybe it's easier for an entity that has other things they're going to do, like an electric co-op is also good fiber network for their purposes. So I don't know. It's a great question. So in addition to them not being there and not seeing the ROI, Teresa, I think sometimes they're not even completely aware you're not there and the citizens care. Sometimes it doesn't register with them. So I don't understand that either. And it's not all incumbents.
This is Ed. We also, from time to time, we have opportunities that are presented to us, and we understand that there are certain deployments throughout the state. And we have a potential opportunity with a fiber deployment. And if any of you on the call are along the 550, 160 up over Wolf Creek and 285, we would certainly like to help you out. There is a potential fiber deployment along that line into Denver. And so if you have any interest in that, please don't hesitate to reach out to our office, and we'll engage you in those discussions to potentially bring broadband to your rural community. And are there any other questions? As you can see, Megan has put up the speed test. She's also chatted out that URL to make it easy for you to go in and do that through this call. But do we have any other questions for Lisa or the CBO team?
Yeah. Hi, Ed. This is Randy. I submitted one by the text window, but maybe if I can just say it in words. So this is Randy with Signals Analytics, and Lisa, I was very interested in one, if there's just a link to some of the research that you've done, which it sounds like you submitted to the public record, but maybe something that you could provide after the call. And then also, part of the question about the cost of deployment is really answered in looking at studies of deployments. And for instance, I've recently gone through all the Reconnect deployment data and kind of looked at densities and expenditures and so forth. And so I think, to have, and it sounds like a lot of the things that you've studied are very much focused on municipal deployments that have a very different cost characteristic because of density. But I'm wondering what resources you might be able to point to that underlie some of your comments.
You mean in terms of deployment costs?
Yeah, in terms of studies or data set. I know there have been a number of organizations in the industry who've tried to collect databases of deployments. And for instance, I recently went through and sort of recreated Google's Kansas City deployment just from things that were published, just to run some numbers on it. But is there, do you have and maintain a database of deployments, or for instance, when people do these studies, is it how is it done, I guess is the question.
So in our Cartesian cost study, we do go through what has brought down deployment costs. So I would look there first. We don't have a database of deployments. I think from time to time we do follow, you know, a particular city or use case or study. And so I just be dependent on if somebody covered it as a particular use case. It also depends on the investment model. If it's a public-private partnership, one of our members, the Broadband group, they use a utility lease model. I think it really just depends on the particular entity and what their model was and how they chose to deploy. But I think the current place right now where we have information on deployment costs, Cartesian cost study.
Okay, is that on your website or where is that?
Right. So as I said to Meg, we can. So our research is one of our member benefits. So
Okay.
our research is not publicly available, except for sort of the headlines or the purposes that we use it for, like something like this. But as I mentioned in the Cartesian cost study case, we did file that at the FCC and the RDOF proceeding. So that is available publicly. So I can try to get it to Ed after today and he can send it out.
Okay, that'd be great.
But it's also on the FCC website, but I know that's a big morass, so yep.
That's a great segue. Anything that that Lisa sends to us concerning today as resources, we will put up in our video on demand section. Basically, if you just go in and you search today's session or just lunch and learn, it'll take you to where we both advertise, and then we'll put the video on demand, and then any documents like if Lisa gives us a PDF copy of this presentation, we'll put all that up there as well. We've got about 2 minutes, and so is there anyone else who has a question for Lisa? This has been fantastic information, and we want to make sure that your questions get answered.
Ed, this is Teresa again. Just one more to close us out, maybe. Lisa, you mentioned a great statistic that having fiber available has a positive effect on the GDP. Conversely, have you seen any information that shows what not having broadband access for all is costing the United States? And I want to tie that to another observation that you made, in that we've seen what upstream applications have just exploded. Do you think that market, that apps market, has been depressed in this country because of the policies that we've had in focusing on a downstream predominant infrastructure funding by our federal policies? So, have you seen, I love that you're positive and you showed us that GDP, is positively affected, but have you seen anything that's showing what it's costing us that we don't have it, and then we don't have these applications being developed for synchronous communication?
Yeah, so I think on the sort of what is it costing us, I mean, during the pandemic, they estimated a few times how many school children maybe didn't have access to, and I don't have that number in front of me, but don't have access to high-speed broadband. And then anecdotally, we saw kids that had to do homework from a parking lot. A lot of our companies and companies that you all know put up hotspots so kids could drive to a school parking lot or somewhere and still do school because they didn't have access. So some of that was more anecdotal, but I think there are numbers about how many school children they don't think have high access. I haven't seen a number in terms of what else it's costing us. I don't know if anyone's done that study, and that's a good question. And then in terms of applications, we just did a program on demand of applications and what applications require for bandwidth, and we're going to see that accelerate. Some theorize we could see that accelerate by 3 to 5 years, that we're going to be now where we thought we'd be 3 to 5 years from now in terms of demand, because everyone's at home relying on those applications. I haven't seen it depress the applications market, but I do think Upstream in particular it was really all of these video platforms, and we've just never used them like this before. And I think that's what really highlighted and shined a big bright light on the need for having actual upstream and having symmetrical networks. But no, I don't have any data on if it's depressed the application market.
Okay.
But I expect it to go away, right? So I think we have a normal, which is we're all relying on these platforms and applications. And so I do think everyone's had to sort of shift their thinking. Maybe they thought they would be somewhere else in 3 to 5 years, and we're there right now. So
Agreed. Well, thank you.
Well, we want to thank Lisa and the Fiber Broadband Association for the work that they do. This has been very insightful, especially in light of the year that we've had in 2020 with COVID. We want to let you know that this will be up, video on demand, so that you can go in and see this again. And we ask you to point others who were not able to join us today. We are the Broadband, Colorado Broadband Office. And as you can see our website, you can find all things broadband in Colorado, broadband.co.gov, which is where this will be, and any information pertaining to this. Lisa, thank you so much for taking time out to prepare for this and for bringing this vital information to us. And with that, we will conclude today's Lunch and Learn. And please join us every month for Lunch and Learn as we look into all things broadband. Thank you and have a great day.
thank you very much.